and jacked up. Making stuff and jacked up.
Thomas.
Making stuff and jacked up. Making stuff and jacked up.
Let it go. You say, get out of the way. Get me to understand.
Thomas, killing these beats, bro. Trust me.
The time is here now.
You're listening to Meadows and Makers podcast.
With Jack Dub and making stuff. Peace.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the Steamiverse. I am probably a little behind. I'll continue my talking, but I'm probably a little behind on my time there, on my timing, but I'm coming in at you, and welcome to another week of the Meadows and Makers podcast here on MSP Waves. And thank you for joining this morning to ride the waves. This show, I am Greg, also known as Making Stuff on the Steemit blockchain. And this show is all about trying to live a more resilient life in these modern times using, some of the tried and true tested technologies we have out there, and then trying to live more self-reliantly on, as homesteaders and people that are trying to live off grid and live a little bit more self-reliantly outside of the current system. And so that's what this show is about. And I try to bring you guys folks that are going down that path. And hey, Ko, how's it going, man? I got to meet Ko in real life in IRL in Arkadelphia. So it's good to see you here. I'll go ahead and do a shout out to everybody that's hanging out in the audience. We got Hypexel Spiral. We got Peachy Mod, Rondon, Soundwaves Photon. We got Ko that just showed up. And thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you guys coming to hang out. And then we got Mama Monza and Crimson Clad just showing up, coming in. So hey, y'all, thank you for being here this fine day. And I really appreciate everybody hanging out for the show. This week, I have on returning guest Robbie Olson, and we will be continuing our tutorial on some of the fundamentals of aquaponics and how to build those systems. And so we'll have him on a little bit in a little bit. And so Ko, have to have you on. Yeah, man, we'll set something up to have you back on the show. Ko has got their Ko exchange started and presented that at in Arkadelphia, so that's really exciting, man. That's cool that you got that going. So that's a really big journey to go and get started. So yeah, we'll talk to you about that, and then get you lined up for another future show here. So, just to get the show started here, I need to do the show disclaimer, do a little housekeeping, is that the views and opinions that are expressed on this show are my own and those of my guests, and they do not reflect on MSP Waves and the wonderful people that run this community around here. So appreciate them for hosting all this. And Ko, yeah, if you have some photos from the Anarchadelphia event, you're free to post them. That's fine. Wow, that was a lot of words right there. From Hypixel Spiral, got a big poem going on right there. But anyway, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and so if you have any feedback about the show, I'd love to hear from you. I make the posts under the Meadows and Makers account. And after every show, if you have any feedback for me about the show, future guests, things like that you'd like to see come on the show, I would love to hear from you. So if you are able to leave a comment or anything after the show and with the recording up, I'd love to hear from you guys and get any kind of feedback on any kind of feedback you have about what's going on. So. Yeah, it was. We got to co put down at when we met at Anarchadelphia. We both attended this event by Clive DeCarl, and if none of you guys are familiar with Clive DeCarl, I totally recommend checking him out. And he has a lot of in-depth knowledge on how to stay out of the current medical system and do a lot of needed supplementation in your life. And so I talked a little bit about that last week. But one of the things that he looked into is these violet ray devices that were Tesla's inventions. And he was able to demonstrate these devices to us all. And we got to, use them on ourselves on places where there may have been some pain. I used it on my shoulder, and where I have just this old lingering football injury, and so I use that, and then I also used it in my ear. I've had ear problems for several years, and I used the violet ray device, which had an attachment that would go inside your ear, and I used that, and I feel like I can hear a little bit better out of that ear now. And he cued me into using colloidal silver in the ear, because that both ears get infections quite often, and so I actually started to do the colloidal silver in both ears, and I feel a lot better. I used to get these cluster headaches from having these ear infections and all that, and it's really cleared up. And so I'm kind of a believer in these devices. So that violet ray device is especially interesting. And so definitely something to check out. Go check out Clive DeCarl. And magnesium, yes. We talked about magnesium a little bit later last week. And that was a big thing to actually supplement with magnesium. All right, so we had the bot go down. Yeah, I guess. That's a bummer. So anyway, one of the workshops I attended there while I was at Anarchadelphia, and the entire experience was just it was just so next level for me. It was just a really transformational experience, and getting to meet some of these people that I have known and followed for a while on YouTube, and getting to meet them in real life, and get to actually connect with some people in real life was just such a great experience. And so, yeah, there I am. Ko got a good picture of me using the violet ray device on my shoulder. And so So yeah, I was actually in that YouTube video that one of the guys took during Clive's special workshop there. And it was in Leah Boone's backyard, which is Mark Passio's assistant. And she was able to host us while we were up there for this special workshop by Clive. And so yeah, these violet ray devices are very interesting, and definitely go look into some of that kind of stuff. But anyway, one of the workshops that I attended was the Teaching Natural Law workshop by Mark Passio, and it really charged me up to begin talking about that and talking about natural law and incorporating it into my content. And so at the beginning of every episode of the Meadows and Makers podcast, I'd like to cover one aspect of teaching natural law. And so last week we talked a little bit about what the word occult meant, which it simply means hidden. And so that's where I'd like to start back up this week before we bring on Robbie, and give out some prizes for anybody in the audience for some audience participation in this, if you're so inclined to. But if you look on the website, you can see the image there of the pyramid. And so we talked about occult and the meaning, which is hidden. And so if you look at this pyramid, you have the people at the top, which understand the knowledge and keep that hidden knowledge to themselves. And then you have everybody else that is ignorant of this hidden knowledge. So that is represented by the pyramid there. And so I want to get into a little bit further deep dive into this. And so to cover the difference of the words ignorance and nescience. And so get into that real quick here. Oh my God. I just had Discord die on me. So, well, that's fun. Sorry about this, y'all. I just had a crash on it with my Discord for some reason. I'm going to keep going. I have my recording up still. So I'm going to keep going with the recording and get into natural law a little bit. I might have to close out of my Discord and and get back into it. But anyway, occult knowledge constitutes both the knowledge of human consciousness and how it operates, and the knowledge of natural law, the unseen universal spiritual laws which govern the consequences of human behavior. That was the last thing that we covered last week. Such that the knowledge is not commonly known because it has been deliberately hidden in order to create and maintain a power differential between those who hold that information and those who are ignorant of it. The knowledge of natural law and its operations constitutes the most deeply occulted information on earth, which powers that be seek to keep hidden from the people of earth at all costs, because its understanding would level the playing field and put an end to the currently entrenched systems of control. So, to talk about this, there's a couple of definitions of context of not knowing. What is the difference between nescience and ignorance? So, does anybody know what the definition of nescience is? Can anybody give me that definition? And then alternatively, can anybody give me the definition of ignorance? If anybody may be familiar with those terms. All right, I see Discord back up here. I see Discord back up. All right. So the definition of nescience is from the Latin verb nesciere, to not know because knowledge was absent or unattainable. So to be completely unaware of the knowledge. And so that is the definition of nescience. And ignorance, it comes from the Latin verb ignorare, to not know even though necessary information is present, because that information has been willfully refused or disregarded. So knowing but not wanting to see the knowledge. So you're confronted with the knowledge, but you willfully ignore it, is ignorance. And then nescience is just not even having the information available. And so those are the things that I want to cover this week. And that's just another step into teaching natural law. So hopefully everything is back up and going here. Can you guys hear me well? Is everything going well on that end? I hope so. Yeah, so this was one of the things that was talked about at the conference, and just a something that I'd like to continue to bring to the show. I don't know what's going on with these with Discord right now. Maybe because we're getting into natural law. I don't know. But hopefully we can get all this figured out and keep this going here, keep this rocking and rolling. And so, oh, wicked. Oh, Soundwaves Photon, that's awesome, man. That's a really great little thing there. Don't be a tool, make stuff. Meadows and Makers with making stuff. Oh, dude, that is killer, man. I I have to, man, I love that. I really do love that. So, I'll have to talk to you after the show, man. I got your number, so I'm gonna give you a call, Soundwaves Photon. I'm gonna talk to you about some of these things, because I really want to get like some more. I want to get some better graphics and stuff for the show, and to be able to put out there. So, hell yeah, gooder than hell. That was a gooder than hell design right there. Swoop's the man on designing stuff. I love it. All right, so if anybody does anybody out there play Splinterlands? Or, well, I guess pretty much everybody's probably played in the audience here. Everybody's probably playing in the audience, yeah, right here. Anyway, if you haven't played Splinterlands yet, I'm at Yabapam at Anarchadelphia, and I have a free starter set code. So if you are interested in playing Splinterlands, hit me up in a private message or something like that. I have a free starter pack I can give you, so, for hanging out for the show. All right, so we got we got my buddy Robbie coming on. He was caught up with a few things before the show started. We're gonna do a Zoom call. If I can get him pulled up, but we're gonna pick back up where we left off the previous week that I had him on, or the previous couple weeks ago that I had him on going over some of the fundamentals of aquaponics systems. And speaking of that, this morning we're partnering up together. Actually, we're gonna put out a crowdfund soon for a Kickstarter campaign, and we're going to be hosting a live workshop on aquaponics, and we're going to build one of Robbie's designs for a suburban and urban backyard, a aquaponics system for suburban and urban backyards that can be used to create food for the family, and be able to also be a breeder system so that you can breed fish yourself. So we got John Doer 123 showing up here that just showed up. and that's great. Welcome, brother. Why isn't the show on MSP Waves? It should be showing on the site. I hope so, and hope everything is coming up there on the site. So we're gonna be partnering up to do first live workshop that I'm gonna host on my property, and so getting prepared for that, and look out for that coming up soon. So when Robbie comes on, we'll probably might talk about that a little bit more. But plan to offer some rewards for people that want to contribute to the campaign, which include the build plans for the system and the video of the build of the system after we do the workshop. So keep an eye out for that. So that'll be really cool. And then another update from Anarchadelphia was that I got to meet Derek Bros in person, who's a guy that I really admire his activism and everything that he has going on. And so I was able to take his workshop as well, and was trying to line up an interview with him. So I just sent him out an email this week about trying to get him on the show. So hopefully, I know he's running for mayor in the city of Houston right now, and he's actually making quite a bit of waves over there. Pretty well, getting invited to these different speaking events. And so yeah, Derek Bros. Derek yeah, his last name is Bros. So it's go look him up. It's consciousresistance.com is his website, and he is a big part of a lot of what he does is talk about permaculture and local activism in your neighborhood, and trying to get community gardens going, and a lot of more of the boots on the ground activism, and also creating the world that we want to see physically by taking the actions in the world. And so he's a guy that I really his message, his activism is something that I really resonate with, and so I'm a big fan of his, and we got to link up during Anarchadelphia, and hopefully I'll have him on sometime in the future whenever he gets a chance. I might not be able to catch him for a live show on the weekend here, but hopefully I can catch him at a later, or for a pre-recorded show. All right, looks like we have Robbie.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, how's it going? Brother?
Hey, how are you today?
I am fantastic, sir. How are you?
Doing fine. Went and made my run this morning. Got some more logs in here, rounded up some more business, and spent the last hour or two updating this presentation for the water chemistry. So,
all right,
everything's fine.
All right, brother, that's great, man. So I told everybody a little bit to check out and keep their eyes open for us partnering up on putting on a live workshop. So I told everybody about that, and if you're ready to go, we can get maybe if you want to talk about that for a minute, and then if you're ready to go, we can get into the presentation.
Yeah, well, as far as the workshop goes for you and I, we're going to build a small system, a starter system that we're calling the Urbanite, and it's designed for people that live in constrained areas. You live in town or something. It basically uses two 50-gallon tanks, whether they be aquariums or whatever, and some 5-gallon tanks, and then a built structure. And it's all set up to primer you so that you can build the system, understand how it works, and move on from there. Once you understand how that system's put together, you can scale it and build larger systems all you want.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I was gonna team up and do that, and put it on video, and have some PDF files out there too. So hopefully be putting a website up so that we can have all of this stuff going to a central location.
Yep. And yeah, so working on that this week, and look to bring that out to you as soon as we can get a website live, and then we'll be putting out a Kickstarter campaign and blasting that out to everybody. So just to look for some extra support and for this thing, and you know, get
it. You know, when we started doing the planning for that thing, it really kind of surprises you how much is involved in it and how much it costs to set up something like that.
Yep.
You got a lot of logistics you have to work out. So anyhow, that's what the Kickstarter's for.
Yep. So, yeah, if you're ready, if you have your presentation ready, I've got this live streaming out, and
sure, I do.
We can get.
Let me pull up my share here, and I'll pull up my presentation and get it going.
All right.
So bear with me just a second.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm not seeing where it'll let me do the slide show.
Can everybody hear us okay? That's out in the audience. Everything everything coming through okay right now on Discord. Looks like I'm not getting anybody talking right now, but hopefully everything's coming through okay. Everything looks like it's going through well on my end.
Good Lord. I'm having difficulty with my sharing here. Just hang tight for a second.
All right.
If I can get I'm just going to save it. Go back up. Okay.
Sorry about this, folks. Sounds good.
Yeah, slideshow.
Rondon says Discord is working for now. So.
Okay.
So that's good.
Well, I can't get the thing to go into full screen mode so that it'll show the thing. I'm trying to do PowerPoint here.
I can see your slideshow.
You can see my slideshow.
Yeah, if you want to
set up slideshow, custom slideshow. Okay, here we go.
Should be able to go from current slide
Are you seeing the screens moving right now?
Yep. I can see it.
Okay.
Yep.
So last time we had talked about this nitrogen cycle, and we went through all of these different stages of the nitrogen cycle. So just run over the summary of that right quick. You know, we want to remove certain aspects of the nitrogen cycle and encourage other aspects. And we do that through the system setup, and then also chemistry is going to come into play here. We're going to talk about that here in a minute, but we basically have 3 segments of the nitrogen cycle we want to foster and 3 segments we want to control and squash out. And so we went through all of the various designs, I believe, last time, didn't we?
Yeah, we I believe we got into the different types of designs and what the optimal design. I think he got to the Renaissance man or something like that.
The modern man here. We had the Renaissance man had the swirl tank, and then we went to the industrial where you put the biofilter in. And then the last one has the mineralization tank, and we talked about too where we added another tank after the biofilter just to have something so that we can maintenance the system, but it's not absolutely required. So we did that. We showed slides about how the grow beds were built and everything. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the water chemistry. And when you bring fish into a system like this, they're going to produce the waste, the ammonia, and then the ammonia then is going to change the water chemistry. And we're going to have bacteria come along that's going to alter the water chemistry again. But everything has to work together. So the chemistry is a big component of it. You don't have to be an expert at this stuff, but just having a basic understanding of what's going on is going to take you a long, long ways.
Right.
I
am just to let everybody know, I am watching the chat on my phone. So if anybody has any questions during this presentation, to go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll field them on my phone while you're doing the presentation.
Okay.
So.
And I can't even see the chat, so you'll have to relay that.
I will, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, our goal here is to strike a balance between our chemistry and our biology, because the biology is going to do the magic for us, but because of the biology, we're going to have a little balancing act we have to do with the chemistry. And it's not as hard as it sounds. It seems like when you first start this, it's really overwhelming, but it's really not that bad when you get started. But the first thing that we talk about is pH. And what is pH? I mean, pH is potential hydrogen. And they call it that because hydrogen ions will change. And as they change, it affects whether the water is alkaline or acidic. And
all right,
you could get highly detailed into this, and then in my book I go into a good bit of detail about cation exchange and things, why this works. But for this show, we're just going to talk about some of the basic stuff.
So if for the plants, they like a more acidic environment, correct?
Well, most plants will create an acidic environment. What they do is they bring in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through a respiration process, and that CO2 goes down to the roots and is off-gassed around the roots, mixes with water, and turns into carbonic acid. And that carbonic acid then breaks down minerals around the plant roots so that it can absorb the nutrient. And so because of this, the respiration of the plant is going to drive our system ultimately into a more acidic state, but we'll get into that here in a minute. But if you're not familiar with the pH scale, 7 is neutral, and we don't see much in nature that's exactly 7. It's a little over, a little under. But the more you go down the scale, and if you can see my mouse here, if you start at 7, it's 0 as far as the scale is concerned. And then if you go up to 8, you will be 10 times more alkaline than you were at 7. And then conversely, if you go down to 6, you're 10 times more acidic.
All right.
So these scales work in, it's 10 times. So if you go to 9, you're 100 times more. You go to 10, you're 1,000 times more, etc. Now, most things, we're not gonna see pH real high or very, very low unless it gets out of control with us. But ammonia in your fish, let's say you start your system, you got your fish, you put them in, and they start creating their waste product or byproduct from you feeding them. They're going to create ammonia. Now, we talked about in the nitrogen cycle how the bacteria will come along and consume the ammonia. But the ammonia, especially in a beginning system, will alter the pH and drive it up. Okay, and so I've got on the slide here, the presence of unionized ammonia is more toxic. It increases the pH, but decreases as pH falls. And really what that means is that the ammonia is more toxic to the fish in a higher pH than it is in a lower pH.
Okay.
It's still toxic, but it gets, because they have more hydrogen ions attached to it, it causes more damage to the fish in a higher pH.
Okay.
And all right, so
is it better
also,
to have to tend toward a more acidic environment then?
Slightly. We want to ultimately be around 6.8 to 6.9, somewhere around there, because it tips your ammonia down on the other side of the scale for the fish, and it also allows the bacteria to consume the ammonia without having to take that extra hydrogen ion off, so it's more efficient.
Okay.
So, now here I've talked about, this is stuff that I took this information out of my book and just put it in some slides, so I might have to explain some of it. But the temperature and photosynthesis that goes on with the sun striking the water can cause the concentration of the pH to go up and down as well. The water will respirate CO2 and O2 due to temperature, and as the CO2 and O2 changes, that will cause the pH to change as well. It'll go up and down. So when your temperature is lowest, you're going to have a lower pH, and as the temperature goes up, it's going to raise, and then it's comes back down. So when you start out a system, especially if you have a small one, don't be alarmed if you've got it outside. If you see a pH swing in your system during the daytime, it's going to happen. So this is that's what I was just talking about right here, the cycling in the pH. When you start a system and you start trying to develop the bacteria that goes in there, they call that cycling. Once the bacteria has established a foothold, the system's said to have cycled.
Okay.
So in the beginning of the cycling process, before the biofilter is fully established, that ammonia will tend to convert to the more toxic ammonia because it drives the pH up. And, if you let it get out of hand, it can become highly toxic. But we can control it through the way we set it up and the way we introduce the fish, because we can take the fish and introduce them in as small fish and let them build up and grow into the system. And that way you don't have an overwhelming amount of the toxic form right off the bat. Now, once you're fully converted or fully cycled, you can throw large fish in there and the system will handle it. It'll be fine. And this is why a lot of people value the water out of an aquaponics system that's already established, because they'll take the water, put it in their system, and then it'll rapidly establish their system, and they can handle the ammonia.
Gotcha.
But if you're starting out, you won't have that option, so you'll have to cycle the system. Now, this fluctuation is going to be more prevalent in smaller systems. If you're under 100 gallons, you're going to see a lot of the fluctuation during the daytime, which is another reason why you would really want to get the system volume up, if possible, if you have room. And later on, now, dealing with the urbanite that we're going to be building, you can put that in a shaded area. And that's another thing that I would tell you. If you're going to do a small system, don't let it have direct access to the sun, because as the water temperature raises, it's going to fluctuate this pH up and down. It's going to stress your fish.
Yeah, that's a good point. That was a lesson that I learned when I first started this aquaponics journey. Was the first system I built was just directly out in the sunlight, and I started to take pH readings, and my pH would just like swing way in the alkaline range. And
Right.
And my big mistake as well was to not properly cycle the system before, not properly establish the bacteria like you're talking about before introducing the fish to my system. And so,
Well, you have to introduce fish at some point, and I recommend starting with very small fish and let them grow into the system.
okay, yeah,
You could, if you, let's say that you want to get a system started, you can start with small goldfish or something and then bring larger tilapia in later. Just something to help establish the biofilter. I've heard of people taking, oh, well, I go out and buy ammonia, they pour it in the system and they try to fully cycle the system before they put fish in. It's difficult to do because finding pure ammonia that don't have surfactants in it is difficult if you go out to the box store and try to buy, just pure ammonia. You have to really pay attention, read that label closely because they'll have surfactants in them or detergents sometimes, additives into the ammonia, and that will hinder your system or mess it up. So, and then you've got the people that just pee in the water. I know that sounds crazy, but some people do that. They try to pee in the water to raise the ammonia level.
oh really?
Yeah, I would say just get some small fish and put those in there. Let's not be hovering over the system taking a leak every hour or two.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go.
So anyway, that's one of the first lessons that you have to get out of the way when you start, is that you have to get the system cycled. And so once you're established, you can take off in all directions, but the very first thing that you have to do is get some water that's cycled going in there with the biofiltration going. And you can also go to a pet store and you can buy the bacteria, the filter bacteria, and add that to your system, and that will greatly reduce the time it takes to cycle. The bacteria is naturally everywhere. It's in the atmosphere, it's on all the surfaces, it's in the soil, but it takes a while for it to establish because it has to determine, hey, there's a food source here, and then it has to colonize and then start replicating, breeding, I guess you would call it. But if you add the bacteria into your system and you have the components in place that we talked about with the biofiltration, and then you have fish in there adding ammonia, then it'll rapidly take hold and take off for you.
So I know Swoop is being funny, but he says, what's the best way to off gas? And I'm pretty sure he's meaning, the ammonia, but and then he says, don't inhale the ammonia. Yeah, don't inhale ammonia.
Not a good idea. Usually the ammonia won't be a heavy ammonia smell in the water because the water's going to have it diluted.
Yeah.
If you can smell ammonia in the water, then it's probably going to have your fish already dead.
Yeah.
Because the fish can't take that level of ammonia.
Right. Yeah. Because one of the things that I noticed when I got started, when I was having problems with ammonia levels being too high, or the system wasn't cycled well enough, and I had I think I had some semi-juvenile fish when I started, but they were going up to the top and gulping was when I noticed there was a real problem. And so I had other issues going on.
Two elements of that. Yeah, you've got a couple of elements that could be going on with the gulping. You could have low O2 concentration. You could have high CO2 concentration. You could have high ammonia. So without testing, you're not going to know where you're at on that situation.
Yeah.
The first thing that you'll want to do also is you'll want to get you a test kit. And that's the one thing I don't have a picture of right here is a test kit. But API makes a test kit. You can get the three things you need to test for pH, and ammonia, and nitrites and nitrates. That's the four basic things that you want to test for right away when you're trying to cycle your system.
All right.
If you have the means to throw up a picture of a test kit, we could do that. But basically, it's just a little bottle, and you'll have a clear tube, and you'll put a sample of water in the tube, and you'll add for pH. You add 3 drops, and you shake it up, and it'll be, from green down to yellow if it's acidic. And there's a scale on a card that you have, and it'll tell you, or it'll be from the green up into the violets and heavy blues for the high pH. I don't think the basic one goes above like 8.5 or 9. So of course, you wouldn't have anything living if you were that high anyway. But
right.
You could also get you a digital pH meter. And if you're beginning and starting out, I'd recommend probably doing that. But you want to learn how to test with the other one as well. But the problem with the other one is that, if you've got the sample of water with the chemical in it and then you clean it out, if you don't clean that tube out very thoroughly, then it could affect the test the next time you do it. And, typically what I'll do is I'll take 3 tests. And if I'm testing pH, I'll test it in the fish tank, I'll test it in the sump tank, and then I'll go to the grow bed or somewhere like that and take another. And I'll compare all 3 to make sure we're relatively the same. If I'm getting something really wild, changes, I'll change the tube and try it again. And I have found by doing that most of the time there's something down in that little tube, there's a salt buildup or something causing that pH like that to react inside the tube, and it's not a reflection of what you have in the actual water. So
that's a key there. Is it?
Yeah. So
if you want to make sure you clean the tubes between taking samples quite thoroughly.
Yeah, use distilled water. Taking some distilled water and clean the tubes. Now, please don't go out and get the strips. The strips that you get,
you're going to be so aggravated.
You're going to be so aggravated. So either get the little solution that API sells them, or get you a digital pH meter. The digital pH meter is going to remove a lot of questioning and doubt for you, especially on the ones that the colors are close. So that'll help you a lot. Just get a digital pH meter.
Yeah, that's something I would really recommend. Is
when they're not that expensive. I think you can get a basic one for $30-$40, can't you?
Yeah, or cheaper than that, I think. But you don't want to like get the real super cheapo one, because you're gonna have you need to calibrate it in the beginning, and if the super cheapo ones are kind of tough to calibrate, so learn from my mistakes. I bought the super cheapo one, and it's difficult to get it calibrated in the beginning. You have a little dial, and it's tough to get it all kind of figured out in the beginning. So, and then who knows how long
get the mid-range
one.
You don't have to have, especially as a beginner, you don't have to have that $200 or $300 one, because you're not getting down to 3 decimal places on this thing. You're just the single decimal place is fine for our purposes. But you make a good point there. Go into the mid-range with that if you're going to buy one. Now, I understand, the $50 to $75 is a lot more than 15, or 10 for the liquid. And you can get the strips even cheaper, but you'll drive yourself crazy with the strips.
Yeah. So we're having I'm having some technical difficulties just being able to watch the chat room. So it's
okay. You want me to try to let me see if I can pull it up.
I'll
pull it up on my phone and see if I can.
Well, it's not that big a deal. I can kind of go back and forth, but yeah, it looks like we're getting some issues with Discord right now. So sorry about the technical difficulties, folks, but let's see. Yeah, so Discord's working on your end. I'm having trouble watching it on my phone because that's the only way I'm able to check out what's going on the chat room. Rondon says it's going out all over the world, so there's really nothing we can do about it. They're listening, and I will be just periodically checking the chat, so we're okay. So let's just keep on rolling.
Okay. I'm going to keep rolling. Okay. So we talked about the temperature a minute ago and the respiration of the CO2 concentration. So when CO2 increases, as the temperature increases, it affects the pH, makes it go up and down. CO2 decreases, alters the amount of the hydrogen ions, and that'll drive the pH up and the ammonia into the more toxic form. So, okay, so here I'm saying that I just said that backwards as to what I've got on my notation here, but as the CO2 decreases, the pH goes up and the ammonia becomes more toxic. And then as the CO2 increases, pH goes down. But
Okay.
we don't want high CO2 concentrations in our system if we can help it. Now, here's a graph that I got from Kentucky State University, and it shows the daily pH of this pond water that they were showing. And you can see it started out, below 7, and then by late afternoon was pushing 9 and then back down again. So I just threw that in there just because some people are geared towards seeing this sort of thing with the bell curve where you can tell what's happening.
Data.
Data, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the temperature affects the respiration of the CO2, which in turn affects the pH. We got that. The CO2 consumption increases as temperature increases, and the temperature swings affects pH, which affects the ammonia levels. So as the pH swings up and down, the toxic form of the ammonia is going to swing up and down as well. And now we're going to add something else into this mix because the grow bed media can affect pH as well. And we have to make sure that whatever media we get is what we call pH neutral. And that keeps our chemistry in line where we're not changing the chemistry. So I know when you did your first one, you was experimenting with some aircrete.
Yeah.
And it was altering the chemistry of the system because it was driving the pH up, and that was raising your toxicity of your ammonia.
Yeah. Because the concrete has the lime in it, I guess, and
Right.
when that interacts with the water and mixes in with the water, it's gonna push the alkalinity up in the water if it interacts with it at all. So,
Yeah, you have to have it completely sealed off if you're even thinking about any kind of concrete product.
yeah,
It'll have to have some kind of rubber liner or something completely sealed, because if you get any contact with that water, it's going to dissolve out and raise the pH.
Yep.
Okay. So what we want to do is we want to stabilize this pH. And the media is part of that. And if you want to you can use any kind of media like we just talked about, as long as it's pH neutral. Larger volumes of water help stabilize the pH.
Yeah.
So you get larger. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. So I've had success using pea gravel and lava rock, and
Right.
And you use Riverstone, right?
I use Riverstone.
And that you can get a really good price
what you do
for, right?
too. Yeah, you could go down to a local landscaping place and get pea gravel or Riverstone. But here's a little test you can do. You can take a mason jar or some kind of jar with a big lid on it, put a couple of inches of vinegar in there, take it with you, and then whatever media you're thinking about using, just put a couple of the pieces down in the vinegar and sit there and watch it for a few minutes. And if you see bubbles coming off of that media, you know that the media is interacting with the vinegar because it's dissolving away and it's creating a pH altering effect. So if you put your stones or whatever it is, whatever media you're going to use, you put it down in this vinegar. If it just sits there and there's no bubbles coming off of it, you're good to go. You just don't want to put anything in there because some gravel that you get will have little veins of limestone or stuff. Sometimes you can't even tell, and you'll put it down in this thing and you'll see the bubbles coming off, and it's like, whoa, okay, I don't want that. And I made that mistake early on myself because my pH was all over the place and I couldn't control it. And come to find out, it was my media itself that was causing the problem.
Yeah.
So
if you have any questions, that's a test you can do about the media that you're trying to use in your system. You can
right.
You can
and
use that
I wouldn't assume anything. I'd take that with me, whatever I was going to buy. I'd take that with me and try it because you don't want to assume that it's going to be fine. Get it in there and get it installed in the system, and then be 2 weeks later find out that, oh my God, I got to take all this out.
Yeah.
So, and our purpose for doing all this stuff is so that you guys can avoid some of these pitfalls. We want people to get involved in aquaponics. Aquaponics is going to give you some food freedom that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
And by having a decentralized food system, we can have a healthy population, and we can everything else that comes with it. So,
Yep. And the healthiest food. Your wife gave me some of the cherry tomatoes you had out of the aquaponics system earlier this week.
Yeah.
I've already eaten them all up, man, and they're delicious. They have this they just have this great flavor to them, and
well, that's because the plants are absorbing the nutrients correctly, and you don't have artificial inhibitors or artificial fertilizers that are cutting off all the macronutrients and micronutrients. Sure, you can get a plant to grow real fast and get it huge by throwing in the 3 basics on the fertilizers, but if it doesn't pick up those other mineral content with it, then you're going to lose the nutrition and the flavor in the process.
Yep.
So.
Yep. But those were Those are a testimony, and I know when I was I had cucumbers and things growing out of my system for a little bit, and the lettuces they just everything tastes better when you grow it yourself. But then also there's something extra about these aquaponic systems where you get some really great flavor out of the stuff you grow.
Yeah, and the reason for that's going to be apparent here in a minute because we're going to get into some other stuff. But I talked about the plant roots already, adding the carbonic acid. And they do that through a respiration process. And, we'll come in there and add a buffer in there too. So, all right, so here's some pictures that I threw up here of what they call fired clay balls medium.
Okay.
Now, this stuff is probably the best thing to put in there. It's not jagged, it's round, it's smooth, it's easy to work around, it's fairly light, but it is expensive.
Yeah.
And so this is why I go back to the stone all the time, because the stone on the grow bed sizes that I have is already, costing me $40 or $50 to put in each grow bed. But this stuff here will be several hundred for the 12-foot beds like I have.
Gotcha.
So, but now this is a great product. Don't get me wrong. It is expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So pH effect on nutrient absorption. This is what we were just talking about. See, your minerals are absorbed through the plant roots, and they can absorb solids. We talked about that in the biofiltration segment, or the biology section of the nitrogen cycle. And You can get some nutrient absorption through leaves, through direct contact with the leaves that can absorb in, but most of the time, 99% of the time, it's through the roots. And in order to absorb the thing, it has to break it down, and it does that through this carbonic acid. It brings the carbon, or the CO2, out of the atmosphere, puts it down around the roots of the plants, turns the water into carbonic acid, which then breaks apart the mineral chains into salts, and this process is called a cation exchange.
Okay.
But this is how the plants absorb the nutrients, because they'll take the ions off of the particular mineral, convert it into a salt, and then that salt ion then will be absorbed into the plant and used.
Yeah.
And so this is a key thing too, and a lot of people don't understand this process. And so anyway, so we got 16 basic minerals that's, they teach you in school. It's considered to be the essential part for the plant growth, but it can go all the way up into the 80 and 90 thing when you get into the micro minerals, just tiny little fragments of copper and things like that. And you can get those minerals by adding some salts in there later on down the road. There's a product out there called C90, and all it is a dehydrated sea salt, and it has just a bunch of micro minerals in it. And you could take a tiny little scoop of that stuff, put it in your system, and now you have all of the ionized salts already available for the plants.
Yeah.
And as long as your pH is set up at the right level for your plants, they absorb that stuff right in. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually the ionized salts are what the plants are uptaking as their food.
Exactly. As their food. And so the respiration of the CO2, people think of that as breathing, because they will put off oxygen and water vapor out of the top of the plant as well, because they're at the same time they're putting off CO2 down into the medium down there to break down the minerals. There's an oxygen exchange that goes on to create these salts, and it uptakes the oxygen in the salts as well. So that's the oxygen. The oxygen is like the carrier that moves it up, and then it goes out of the plant. And so this is where we get a respiration from the plants.
Yeah, that's the magic of this whole thing. This is getting down to the fundamentals on what the plant is actually doing.
What the plant is actually doing. And this happens with soil-based agriculture as well. But because we've done so much chemical fertilization over the last several decades, what we've done is we've fundamentally altered the soil medium itself in such a way that it can't maintain these salts. And so they have to keep adding these fertilizers in there all the time, which is created through an acidic process. And it changes the pH of the soil. And at the same time, it alters the salts and washes away the stuff. So we wind up with soil that won't produce unless you add chemical fertilizers to it, which is great for the chemical fertilization company, but that doesn't do any good for us, because now the plants can't uptake the micronutrients anymore.
Yeah.
And this is why it's different. So yeah, we've just talked about all of this stuff here that I've got on this slide. So
yeah,
dissociation.
So that chemical process is just one of the fundamental concepts on understanding how that nutrient uptake works. And when you first told me about that, it really blew my mind.
Yeah, and this is why we don't want sludge in our grow bed.
Yeah, because it interferes with that ion exchange, right?
Exactly. It interferes with the ion exchange, and it absorbs the oxygen out, which is the carriers for the micronutrients. And we don't want that. We want to get that stuff out of our grow bed.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some we can't help it. You're going to have insects that are going to get in there and die. The plant roots themselves are going to periodically die off. You're going to have some organic decaying material in your grow bed, no matter what you do. And short of sterilizing it every time, you're going to have it. But setting it up this way with the aquaponics, we can use it because it's just a natural process. And we just encourage the natural process and foster the components that we need for the organisms, and nature takes care of the rest of it. But we won't know how to get this thing balanced if we don't understand some of the fundamentals. So by understanding some of these fundamental ideas, like I said, you don't have to be an expert at this. What I'm going over right here is just enough information. You can drill down to more of the nuts and bolts, but this is the basics of it. So just understanding the basics can take you a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's the key of being able to build or to be able to customize your own stuff is to actually understand that the fundamentals, and you can kind of explore other options. You can get creative from there.
Right. So, yeah, and once you've built a small system, you understand how to get it cycled, and you understand the basics of this chemistry and the organic process, you can take this thing any direction you want. So it's just limited by your imagination.
Yep.
All right. So disassociation, these are some of the terms. This is the process that I was talking about where it absorbs the ions. It's where the ions are dislodged or disassociated from the base elements. And so when you see that term dissociation, that's what it means. It means that you've got a mineral sitting over there, plant puts a carbonic acid down there, creates a chemical process which dislodges the ions, puts it into salt, and then the plant absorbs it.
All right.
So the process of all this is what's known as the cation exchange. Now, cation exchange is higher in nutrient-rich water. It's recycled, and this is why you get explosive growth out of these grow beds where you're thinking that a lot of people see the no soil and they're like, what? How can it grow in that stone? It doesn't have to have the stone as long as you have this cation exchange and those nutrients in place, something for the roots to grab onto, then we're good to go. So it's a vast improvement over the soil growing method because you can constantly recycle this thing and absorb all the cation exchange out possible with it. And then you're adding it back in as it cycles back through. So it's, in my mind, it's vastly superior to soil gardening. Now, there's a lot that you would want to do with soil gardening as well, but you can take the water out of this system, as we talked about before, feed it into a soil bed, and what'll happen is all of this nutrient-rich, highly charged ionic water will then infuse into that soil, and that soil will become super rich.
Yeah.
And that goes a long ways as well. So, the fish water alone can take you a good ways with your soil gardening too.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Especially on things like fruit trees or bushes and things like that. It can really, really help feed the plant.
Right, and there's two things that go on there. You've got the waste off of the fish water, obviously, that has the ammonia that gets into the soil and then it gets broke down. But if you're using aquaponic water, you've already got this cation exchange going on in the water. And so you're going to have a bunch of these ions floating around in the water for the plants to immediately absorb.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about the hydrogen ions for a minute. It's the hydrogen that does all the work. So the hydrogen is the catalyst between all of these reactions. So the hydrogen ions released when the carbonic acid is formed from the water and the carbon dioxide during the respiration. The hydrogen, if you look at the chemical part of it, has this extra electron out there, and if you move when you change the electron around, you change the form of the hydrogen, and it's readily easy to do, and hydrogen's really abundant. So that's the reason why hydrogen is one of the basic forms of this thing.
Yeah, well, if I can interject right there for a second, Clive DeCarl interviewed a guy that has a HHO generator, and on his site he says that injecting this HHO, which is like the separated hydrogen oxygen, into your aquaponics system can really help the aquaponics system.
Well, that's because the hydrogen is the facilitator of the ion exchange.
Yeah.
And water is hydrogen and oxygen. It's H2O.
And we're actually they say that we are mostly carbon. Well, we're actually mostly hydrogen because we're mostly water.
Right. And what's so crazy too is when you start looking at all this stuff, you realize that this is the exchange that goes on with almost all biology, and it's really crazy. Even with animals and us in particular, we have to have a certain salinity to our chemistry in order to absorb the nutrients. And if our salinity gets out, then we're not absorbing nutrients either.
Right.
And this is because the salts have those ions on there, and this is the way energy is exchanged
in biology.
Between cells in biology. Sure enough. So, but yeah, it's the exchange of these hydrogen ions that make the nutrients available, and this is done, like we said, through the carbonic acid, breaking it down. So now the plant respiration, as we've been talking about this whole time, contributes to the overall pH of the system. So if you left it unchecked and you didn't do anything to mitigate the pH at all, and you had the plants in there and it's just cycling away and it's doing its thing, it might be great for a while, but then after a little while, the pH is going to start to drop because you're going to have carbonic acid buildup in the system. It's going to start to drop the pH down. So what's going to happen when our pH starts to drop? We've got several things. We're going to have our anaerobic bacteria is then going to get a foothold and take over the system. It's going to rob out all the oxygen, and we're going to wind up with something that's putting off ammonium sulfate or something like that. It's going to smell like nobody's business, and everything's going to die.
Okay.
Right. Now, we talked about this before, about when the system goes septic, and the sludge contributes to that. But the respiration of the plants will contribute to it too. It's just a little slower because the water will respire some of the CO2 back out into the atmosphere. But it'll slowly start coming down. But it's really easy to fix this. All we have to do is put something in there, a buffer, for that acid to eat away at, and it mitigates that. So what we do is we put the calcium carbonate in there. And the calcium carbonate then stabilizes that pH. The plants keep creating the carbonic acid, which facilitates our ion exchange. But at the same time, our calcium carbonate then gets dissolved away along with the nutrient stuff, adding essential calcium to the system that we need. Now, you can put organic fish, not fish, but chicken eggs
The
shell,
eggshell.
eggshells. You could take those and put them in there too. You just want to make sure that you put them in an oven and dry them out because you don't want to introduce any kind of salmonella or anything in the system. But
Okay.
yeah, you could take those and dry them out real good, crush them up, put them in a pantyhose stocking, put it over in the tank, and it'll slowly dissolve away and act as a buffer.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
if you use the eggs, that will add iron back to your system as well.
Oh,
So
multiple benefits off of that.
multiple benefits. The calcium carbonate is a lot easier, and when you're first beginning, I would recommend just doing the calcium carbonate.
Yeah, and
Because you're going to
you
get
can
calcium out of that too.
and you can get that from your local Tractor Supply or co-op or
Right.
something like that, right? And it's pretty
Right.
cheap.
It's real cheap, yeah. Just get an organic calcium carbonate that they add into livestock feed. And, they add it into the livestock feed so that the animals can have a source of calcium in their diet.
Right.
Because the blood and the bones are all dependent on the calcium. And, your blood and your bones and bone marrow all depends on the calcium. So, and same thing with the plants. The plants will not fruit without the calcium.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, in most cases anyway, and if they do, they'll have a calcium deficiency and the fruit will die off because the plant goes into a survival mode and it's more interested in surviving than it is putting out, fruits.
Okay.
All right. So now our acid reactions here, we have different sides of this thing. So our nitrogen cycle here is facilitated by the ammonia, namely our organic solids that come out of there, mostly fish waste, produces ammonia. Now in a normal soil-based system like we talked about, they take ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate, ammonium phosphate. They create a fertilizer out of it, but it's all an acid reaction fertilizer that changes the pH that it adds it to. So that's why I was talking about earlier that it alters the soils. But then we have an alkaline side of the thing too. And on the alkaline side of the coin, we got sodium nitrate, calcium nitrate, and sodium nitrate and calcium nitrate. The sodium nitrates, they form chemically in our system when we add Epsom salt, and then the calcium carbonate will facilitate the calcium nitrate because we have nitrogen in abundance. And when we start breaking down that calcium into the ionic form, it recombines into calcium nitrate. So it takes care of that. We don't have to add these chemical fertilizers. Don't add it in there is the point.
Right.
And so you'll get a over fertilization if you start adding things in there. You trying to get the system established, and I've seen people do this before. They stick a plant down there, and because something's out of whack, like the pH, the plant's not absorbing anything, and they take one of those doggone fertilizer spikes and stick it down in there. Well, if you do that, you've just messed up your system. It's gonna throw out your cation exchange stuff. You're gonna throw off all your hydrogen, all your nitrogen. Your pH is gonna be out of control, and your fish are gonna die. So
yeah, I experienced some of that with trying to put some microgreens with soil and water that in with the aquaponics system, and that also was giving me issues. So yeah.
What did you do there? I mean, did you try to transplant microgreens out of soil into the aquaponics, or the other way around?
No, I had trays of microgreens with potting soil, and I was.
Oh, and you're filtering the water through.
I had it interacting with the water in the system, so I was trying to be lazy.
Well, that would be fine if you started out that way.
Trying to be lazy.
If you had started out that way and was only using the aquaponic water, it would probably be okay. But if you've got one that you started and you've been using Miracle Grow or something, and you bring it over into the aquaponics, then you're going to throw the chemistry out in the system.
Okay.
And, it might be real small if you just do one little thing. But people have a tendency to not just do one plant spike. They go around every one and stick. And so I know I had to deal with this when we first started because my wife was impatient about getting the thing cycled. And so she's like, well, let's just put these in. I come out there one day and they were just everywhere. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Pulling the stuff out. So, yeah, you can't have that in there.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it alters the pH. It causes your hydrogen ion exchange to go into overdrive. And so it just throws a lot of things out.
Yeah.
All right. So on our pH here, we know it's affected by temperature. We can mitigate that in small systems. We can keep it in the shade, or we can add more water. Large volumes of water help control that temperature. pH affects the ammonia toxicity, and vice versa, the ammonia level affects the pH. So if you get high ammonia levels, tend to drive the pH up, and this is usually what happens when you start a system because it hasn't cycled yet. You don't have the bacteria consuming the ammonia, and the ammonia will drive the pH up when it first starts. So that's when you first start one, that's normal. You're going to see the pH going up. And we don't want to add the calcium carbonate right away because of this. We want to let the system get over the plateau and come back down. And then once we start getting the plant respiration, we'll add the calcium carbonate in there.
Right. Yeah. And so you can, the other option, if it's going to alkaline, right, is to do some type of weak acid or something, right? I guess we'll get into that.
Yeah, I've added some vinegar and stuff in there, but
you probably won't.
Typically, what you would want to do is you want to have rain catchment water available.
Yeah.
Because when you're starting to cycle, you'll want to do water exchanges to run the pH back down. That's going to be your safest and best bet right there to do that. So
yeah.
You got your system going, you've got a couple 100 gallons, and you notice your pH is starting to climb and just inch up and inch up and inch up. You can add things to it to bring it down like you're talking about. But your safest bet is going to be to just take some of that higher pH water and flush it out and add some lower pH water back in. You don't want to do all of it at once. Obviously, it'll stress the whole system. Do a third of it or something like that.
Right.
So typically what I would recommend when you're starting is get you one fish tank, a swirl tank, and a biofilter, and another little settling tank, and a small little grow bed, and put some small fish in there and start cycling that water around.
Yep.
And just let it go around. The fish, as they grow, will produce more and more ammonia. And then you can go to the pet store and buy that bacteria.
Yeah.
Now that's another thing that'll control your pH in the beginning. Is the reason why your pH is going up like that is because your ammonia is going up. You don't have anything there to consume the ammonia. So get some of that bacteria and put in there. Flush your water out first, do a water exchange. Then after you get your water level back up, add that bacteria in, and you'll start to see that thing, it'll plateau off and it'll stabilize and start gradually coming down. And that's you're well on your way to having it cycled when you start to see that. Now you're going to want to test for this stuff too. Just buy your little test kit and do that.
Yep. Yeah, it's
All right, so here's the three things that we're going to add to our system. And we don't add fertilizers, but we can add this. We add Epsom salt, calcium carbonate, and chelated iron.
All right.
We can add these 3 things. And then what you can do also when you're first starting a system to get it to cycle, when you're trying to get it up to being fully cycled and establishing your bacteria, you can add a small amount of blood meal and bone meal to the system to feed the plants. Don't go crazy with it. Just put a little bit in. That'll help your plants bring the carbonic acid in to help stabilize the system.
Right. And yeah, these are all little things that figured out over time, and so yeah, talking about a lot of this stuff. Yeah, it's good to absorb this, but really, I've found when doing this stuff with aquaponics, you really got to get your hands on it to really figure out a lot of this stuff. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always better to put your hands on it. And once you're involved with it and you got your hands on the thing,
you're gonna learn so
these
much.
Things just sink in. Yeah, these kind of things sink in over the course of time you're dealing with it, because you'll be messing with it, be thinking, well, I've got water going here and there, and then the light bulb will come on. But it's really there's just a few basic things that you have to know. About the cation exchange and the pH moving up and down, and know about that biology cycle. If you got that, you're off to the races. So, but now we're going to put all this stuff together. We're going to continue to do videos, and probably what we'll do, I'd like to get some feedback from some people as to whether or not this is too complicated. Do we need to break it down into smaller chunks, or do a detailed video like an hour long, or what's the format that they would like to see on this thing to make it so they could absorb the information.
Yeah, if anybody out on the audience has any feedback for us, feel free to type in the chat. Are you guys able to follow along with some of this stuff, or do you think it could be? What's your feedback? If anybody's got any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear from you. That's hanging out in the audience with us today. So,
right. So that's just the basic rundown of the chemistry. Now you can get into water hardness. There's a lot of confusion about water hardness out there. A lot of people link water hardness to alkalinity, and therefore they want to think that the water hardness is a function of pH. But you can have hard water that is either high or low pH. And water hardness is a measure of the amount of, how do I put this? It's the amount of stuff like calcium that has been broke down into the ionic form, so that you'll have dissolved solids in the water. So it's a measure of those dissolved solids, and that's what water hardness is. If you have a lot of calcium and the water's considered to be real hard, you'll get, I know people have seen this, where you'll have that little salt buildup on your shower head. All right, this is from hard water, what they call hard water. It's because it's got a lot of dissolved solids in there, and as it comes into contact with the oxygen, it reforms into the salts. And so that's what water hardness is. You can measure for water hardness too, and you don't want to have super hard water, but you need to have some dissolved solids in the water to facilitate the cation exchange.
Oh, okay. So would you recommend like a total dissolved solids meter as well?
Well, they have a basic test that you can get with the API where you put the drops in, and it's a real like 1 to 10 scale. And I find that between 3 and 5 is ideal on that. And it's real easy to test. You put 1 drop in, you shake it up, and it's blue. The water's blue. And then you put another drop in, you shake it up, and it stays blue. And then when you get to like 4 or 5, it'll change color to like a yellow. And that's your indicator right there. Okay, so I've got a hardness of 4.
Yeah.
And So yeah, you might have a hardness of 4 on that scale, but have a total dissolved solids of like 85, or somewhere like that on one of those digital meters. So
Okay.
But yeah, you have to have some dissolved solids in your system to facilitate the cation exchange. You don't want it out of control.
Yeah. And then you don't want it to be distilled water, is what you're saying.
Right. You don't want it to be super distilled either, because then you won't have the ion exchange going on.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, Crimson Clad asks if you've ever thought about an ebook, and that's a good thing to bring up, is that you have 2 books that you
right.
that you wrote.
We're working on that as we we're working on that now. So hopefully we can have those out to people.
For the Kickstarter rewards is what we're planning on, to help us
right,
host
the
this
Kickstarter
live
rewards.
workshop.
Right. Yeah, we'll be putting those books out. And right now, the book that I have wrote on everything that we've covered over the last couple of sections is about 90 pages, and it doesn't even touch the build. I've got to get the build stuff put in there, so it's going to be, probably 150, 200 pages, but goes into a little more detail than what I did here, but it's nice to have stuff where you can read it. It's right in front of you.
Yeah.
And I tried not to put it in like super classroom format. I kind of told a story with it as I was going, so that it would let you see how I came to learn these things and the mistakes I made along the way. So yeah, that's something we're definitely working on.
So yeah, thanks for that question, Crimson.
So we just talked about this. The book available soon, hopefully, in the hands-on workshop. And another thing that I do, when I went up to the local college up there and was talking about this stuff, I went into some visualization and planning, and told these guys, I said, you need to have a concept of what you want to do before you get out there and just start randomly building.
Right.
So I would encourage you to do some type of previs, whether you just jot it on a piece of paper, but in my case, I get into this 3D program and throw it out there. That way I can move things around and see what I'm looking at doing. Let's see here. Yeah, I had started doing some things where I was going to show some plants and everything, the hands-on workshop, but obviously hadn't finished this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of where we're at, and this one was a little bit shorter of a thing than we did last time, but I didn't want to get into excruciating detail with this stuff because, like I said, it's not critical that you understand it down to the PhD level, and
right.
It's not a classroom. So
yeah, so this is kind of a primer for anybody that's looking out there that's interested in aquaponics, and we plan on with this live workshop thing and actually releasing. We'll be filming the whole workshop, and so that will be a reward included in the rewards for the crowdfund. And so at the end of the workshop, that'll be released as a video format, and then we plan to launch this website that will hold a lot of this information and be able to get more in depth in master courses if you so desire to learn and go more in depth in this kind of stuff.
Right. So I'm going to throw a share up here right quick of
all right.
if I can get back to it. Okay, new share.
Yeah, we had some issues with Discord, but it looks like all that's fixed now, and I can interact with people through my phone and in the chat. So yeah, if anybody has any questions about any of this kind of stuff, feel free to shout them out, and then we'll go into any of that
All
kind
right.
of stuff.
Are you able to see this grow bed that I've got put up there?
Yeah.
Are you still seeing the PowerPoint? Okay. I was just going to go through and show some of the the growth here that you can expect out of some of these types of systems. And you can see this is some kale that I have growing here,
Oh
or
wow.
had growing.
Yeah, man.
Um,
I have man, I have the worst problem growing the kale in the system I have is set up over at my folks' place, and I just had a terrible time with these hornworm and trying to
oh
take care
man,
of those
hornworms are
guys.
terrible. That's a whole nother section of the book itself is about how to organically control pests. Um,
Yeah, I've had to do
you
that
know,
BT treatment on them. It's a
yeah,
specific bacteria that affects the hornworm, but it doesn't affect the fish or anything in the plants in the system.
right. It's a specific bacteria that only affects those worms.
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
can't let up on the treatment. From what I found, I did one treatment. I thought I was going to be okay,
No,
and that I just got him right
yeah, because
back. And so,
new eggs will hatch, and then yeah, you have to keep going until you get all the hatchings out. But yeah, I was just going to go through here and scroll through and show some pictures so you can see these
wow.
cabbages and the romaine over here. There's strawberries. I did some deep water culture, and it works with this same setup.
Uh-huh.
Um,
What do you what,
so
what are
here
your
you
thoughts?
see,
What are your thoughts on the deep water culture? I tried it out. I tried it out myself, but I noticed there was a lot of things that you have to get totally. You have to get it tweaked really well because you need a certain amount
yeah, there, you
of
have to add a
distance
lot more
between.
oxygen to the water.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I found it to be a lot more labor intensive for not much more yield. Because if you look at these beds, like the one I got right here with these strawberries, these are fairly dense. And if you came in there and did that with the deep water culture, you wouldn't get that much more out of it. But yet you've got to buy that floating raft. You've got to cut holes in that. You've got to have the pods. You have to sprout them. You have to put them in the pods, then float them. Then you have to put. There's just a lot of stuff involved in it. And I'm just thinking, wow, for the same amount of production, you're getting a whole lot less work in these media beds. Now, media beds, granted, are a lot more work to set up because you have to put the media in it. And that's labor intensive, putting the media in. But once it's in there, you're done with that, So the deep water culture, and periodically you have to flush that bed out because solids will gather up in the bottom of it, and
yeah.
you don't have a biology system in the deep water culture like you do in this to consume those solids either. So you can put worms in this, and it'll consume any solids that collect up. So
Yeah, but I've seen all kinds of people do different things with their setups. They'll put in prawns, freshwater prawns, and things like that.
And that's something I want to get in. I want to get involved in some of that and put some shrimp and crayfish and prawns and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, once you have the fundamentals down, you can start playing with all kinds of stuff, and so.
Right. Here's another man. Kale just every system I've had, kale just takes off.
Yeah. So kale is one of those that has a lot of sulfur or sulfurous compounds, if I'm correct.
Yeah, and it's also iron rich. So kale will consume a lot of iron out of your system. So you have to make sure if you're doing kale like this, you add some chelated iron in there.
Okay. One of the things that in Clive DeCarle's presentation, he talked about if you have a lot of joint issues or if you have scar tissue from different things that you need some sulfur. You need to have some sulfurous foods in your diet to help you heal
Makes
from
sense.
those scar tissue things.
Right. You can see here where we got cucumbers here, and just in this one area, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 cucumbers that I can see right there in that one picture. So
Yeah.
you can see tomatoes.
Now that's cool picture right there showing all those tomatoes. Now you're able to clone tomatoes just by taking the suckers and just sticking them right in the
Sticking
rocks,
them right in the soil, and right down here at the bottom of the stem, tomatoes will start a new root system as soon as you stick them in there. They reach out for water, and so this bed is flooding water all the time and draining, and the plant's saying, "Oh, I got water right out here. All I have to do is reach out and grab it," and it starts throwing out root systems. So, excellent cloning setup.
Yeah, you didn't have to. You don't have to do anything to.
You don't have to do anything.
Add any rooting
there.
hormone or anything like that.
No. Don't have to do any of that. Now, I don't know about other plants. I know different plants react differently as far as trying to do cuttings on, but tomatoes are very good about cloning.
Yeah, I know that some of the cannabis users that I've talked to on my show actually say that the tomato is related to cannabis actually, and it has the same.
I've heard that.
It has the same kind of rooting hormone thing that it generates itself to make it easier to clone it and everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can see in this picture, I've got some flowers back here in the back of this thing, and this is to bring in pollinators. So generally, I'll put at least one flowering plant in every bed. Now, this one here, this has some climbing stuff that we put in, and this right here that you see on the top of this is diatomaceous earth.
Okay.
This particular bed, we had some ants get up in the bed.
Yeah.
And diatomaceous earth is completely organic, and ants can't stand the stuff. And so I just sprinkle it around where the ants were, and when they come out of the gravel there, every time the water comes up, they run into this diatomaceous earth, and they're just like, oh, God, it kills them, and they're gone. And
yeah,
that'll be a whole nother.
Yeah, it's like a calcium. It's like seashells that are really ground and fine or something, right?
Well, I don't know if it's seashells. I think it's more of along a line of some type of igneous, like glass rock or something that's just pulverized down to microscopic levels.
Yeah.
And when you look at it under a microscope,
it's got a bunch of jagged edges.
A bunch of little jagged edges. And so when an ant comes along or an insect, it picks those things up and it gets wedged in between the
exoskeleton,
the parts of its exoskeleton, and it winds up killing them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just scrolling through some of these pictures so that people can see, the kind of potential that you have. Now, some of these are pictures of the same beds, over time, so that you can see that they're growing.
Yeah, and once you get this all dialed in, it just takes off, doesn't it? So,
oh yeah, it takes off. So, so again,
when you talked about those flowers, that's something that I didn't fully grasp myself when I got this going. I'm about generating food and that, but flowers are a key component in having an organic food growing operation, especially if you're trying to keep away. Yeah, if you need the pollinators, and then it also can attract the beneficial insects into your system.
Exactly,
like the
dragonflies. And we have a lot of wasps and stuff like that like to come in there and pollinate on these things. And for the most part, in the springtime, I let them go and don't mess with them unless they're just really trying to attack us, because they will eat up all of the doggone aphids and all of that stuff.
Oh, wow.
Especially dragonflies. So, but, you obviously don't want to have a bunch of daggum wasp nests all over the place. But,
yeah.
Just especially if you see honeybees in your system, it's a good thing. You don't want to try to run them out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, yeah, you might actually be able to help attract a wild swarm of bees that way too, possibly. if you're trying to catch a wild
Yeah,
swarm.
possibly.
I'm reading the book. I think it's a book by Thomas Seeley, but it's about catching wild bee swarms, and it's a.
Oh wow.
It used to be a
Cool.
thing that people would do. Actually, it was like hunting bee swarms, and it's I've had a couple of people on the show that do it. Professor Bromide is one of them, and he's
Oh yeah.
he's a big proponent of catching wild bees because they're very well adapted to your area, and they're less likely to
Right,
catch
and-
diseases and things.
Well, there's another thing about localized stuff like that. You live in a specific area, and your body will build up antigens to your environment around. And if you're take honeybees, for instance, their honey will contain components in it that will help you build up antibodies or antihistamines to stuff in your localized area
Yeah.
because they're in the same area. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one of the products that I want to get into is I've built these upcycled beer bottle candles, and I'd love to get some beeswax to make some beeswax candles, and then there's other products you can make with the beeswax, like you can make your own deodorant by adding in something called arrowroot. It's you can grind that into kind of a powder, and it's like kind of has like a little bit of a desiccant property, and then you can add essential
Might be
oils.
willing to try that rather than raking on liquefied aluminum on my armpit.
Oh man, that's horrible. That's horrible. The standard aluminum or the standard deodorants out there have that aluminum in it, and
Yeah,
and your armpits right there absorb, all that
absorb like crazy. Yeah.
absorb and uptake.
Hey,
all
we was
that.
talking about the deep water culture. Right here was here's some pictures of the one that I had set up, and you could see there the lettuces grow well in it, but it is a lot more setup involved. I've got more pictures of that, but there's just not in sequence with the others. I had a whole half a bed, and it was just really lush. But in order to get that half a bed, I had to put a lot of work into it. And I just went back to the media beds because I just said, well, geez, for what I'm doing anyway, it wouldn't pay for me to put that amount of work into it. And then right here on this picture, I wanted to throw this in here because this is similar to the urbanite that we're going to be building in the workshop. If you look in the picture, you can see an aquarium there with two buckets behind it.
Yeah.
And basically what this is it's similar to the urbanite system. And this is my breeding system that I had in my previous greenhouse, but it was independent. And here's the swirl tank filter, and then this over here is the bio filter. And then it dumps over here into the secondary sump with another pump stuck in there, and it pumps the water back out and back up to the fish. So this is the way the urbanite will be designed, something similar to this. It diverts differently and has a grow bed included into it. But it's I just wanted to throw that in there because it'll be a small scale, 8 to 10 feet long and 4 feet wide. And the whole thing will be 4 feet tall or something like that. So you'll have a grow bed in it and a fish tank and sump tank and be able to explore these things and see how it goes together, and then it'll help you understand the concepts of how everything works.
Yeah, and the design that you have makes it easy to, once if you take that and you build a larger system, then you can use that guy for a breeder system, and yeah,
exactly.
And that's a whole nother area for keeping this whole operation self-sustaining is that you need to replenish your stock of fish after they've
Right.
matured.
So I
to a
mean, you got
certain
your
level.
heirloom seed, and then your stock your fish, and your water chemistry and biology is self-replicating. So you have a sustainable system once you get it set up. This picture here is showing that same grow bed. It has the flowers back here, but you can see how much larger the tomatoes are, and this is a couple of weeks growth.
Yeah, man,
So and
those tomatoes really love that. Really love aquaponic systems.
oh yeah, yeah. And there's that deep water culture I was talking about. Um, you can see the plants really, they thrive there, but it's a lot more work. And then here's the same one again with another week's growth. So it's just
Wow.
and here I've got squash growing right here.
And you've been successful growing year round, haven't you?
Oh yeah, that's the reason why I put it in the greenhouse. Um, I keep it growing year round with the thing. So, another thing that grows like crazy in aquaponics is beans. We had some beans in there, and they just flat took over. We finally had to put them in another bed, lower to the ground, because they were climbing all over the place. But this is the cucumber vine right here. So there's more of the squash, and you can see over here now. Here's another week's growth on those tomatoes, and they're just flat taking over.
Yeah. So Saeed joined
There
the
it
audience,
again.
and he said we got on a cliffhanger about the aluminum, but yeah, if nobody knew that the aluminum toxicity can. There's actually been some studies that have seen that aluminum toxicity has been tied to Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yep.
And so you want to try to avoid any of the products that have aluminum in them, especially deodorant. And it's really sick, in my opinion, to put that aluminum in the deodorant because it gets direct. You have your armpits are like a super absorber of things, and your skin absorbs anything that you put on it. And so when people are using that those aluminum products, it's getting transferred into your bloodstream, and then once it's in there, once those metals are in there, they're hard to get back out. You have to chelate.
Right.
You have to chelate aluminum out of your body, and it's not easy to get back out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure it'd be a very uncomfortable detox too.
Yeah, there's.
So right here, I'm showing
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm just saying, I'm right here is an actual dirt bed or a soil bed. It's been fed with some of the aquaponic water, and you can see these squash. They're taking off with it. So
Yeah. Yeah, everything. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was going to get into is that you have complementary raised beds that go into your greenhouse that you grow in the soil with.
right, because what we're doing is we are reconditioning the soil using the fish water, because it's highly charged, ionized, got a lot of nutrient. It's already in the ionized state, and you start adding that into the soil, and the soil just gets super rich over a period of time. You have to just keep using it, but
Yeah.
so anyway, and here's some beans that sprouted out. You can just put the seeds directly in, and this is another thing. And I talked to you about this at one point, but if you take a plant that you bought at a nursery or at Lowe's, and you bring it in, and it's got the potting soil or the whatever the medium is, and you stick it into your grow bed. You need to make sure you wash the roots off, because chances are very good you're going to be transporting pests into your system.
Right.
So take your plant out, take your 5-gallon bucket of water and rinse those roots off really well before you transplant anything. And I would recommend, if you can, just like with these beans here, put some seeds in there. They'll come right up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, so speaking of Steam and Steam It, that I know you're having issues posting. We have Crimson Clad Steamwave Saturday coming up next, and yeah, it's probably going to be a DM discussion. But one of the things that's going on with your Steam account is that you tried to post, but you weren't even able to post, and I delegated some Steam over to you, but it looks like it's got the Steam power incoming, and I don't know if you were able to retry to post anything or anything like that recently, but
Man, I was exhausted last night. I just didn't try. But
gotcha. Well, yeah, if you try again and you're still having issues, then we'll have to get some support from a Philistinian out there that may know a little bit better on what's going on. I investigated the issue. It looked like I really can't tell other than if it's like a resource credit thing or something like that. But it says Steam power incoming delegation, but it doesn't look like you have the Steam power. So anyway, there are issues with you posting to Steam, but you tried. After our last show,
I will try when we get done today. I'll try to do some reposts and see what happens.
But yeah, stay tuned for Crimson Clad Steamwave Saturday, and she's coming up right after me here. So stay tuned. She covers everything Steam related, and we'll field her questions about your Steam related questions about your guide to the Steamiverse. So stay tuned.
Okay.
So
all right.
So yeah, we have we're coming up on the end. We got about 6 minutes left. So if you want to wrap up with any kind of last words or some last final comments or anything, then the floor.
Well,
the floor is yours.
Don't let this stuff that we're talking about, don't let it overwhelm you. It's like I said, you don't have to be an expert at this stuff, but just understanding the basics will allow you to do the aquaponics and be successful with it. I would encourage you to do more than just watch somebody on YouTube throw a chop system together and then rush out there and do it. Do a little bit of homework on it, but don't let this stuff be so daunting that you're afraid to try, because it's really not that complicated. It's just a matter of understanding the basics on it. And so, yeah, don't let it. I hope that what we're talking about here isn't scaring people away.
Yeah, me too. And like I said, please, once the recording is up, please give us any comments or anything about the show, and constantly trying to make this show better. And provide a great educational and informational show for you guys. So, and I love to hear your feedback. So, I appreciate everybody that's hanging out.
Aquaponics is really, I think that aquaponics is the future of agriculture. It conserves water. You get a higher density of nutrition. You don't have to use chemicals and pesticides. You don't have the genetic modified stuff. You're going to be healthier, and all of the surrounding areas, the plant life and animal life around you is going to be healthier too. And not only that, but it'll help stabilize our just on time food system, and just so many benefits to it. That's the reason why I'm doing this, because that I can try to get this out.
Heck yeah, and Mama Monza, that's great. And she says that's why I keep coming back each week, to learn as much as I can before I make the leap. You rock, Mama Monza. Appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I just big shout out to everybody that was hanging out in the audience today. I'll go through. We had Crimson Clad, Goat Alien, Hypexel, Spiral, Pensive. Rondon, Sahid Miller, Steve McQuah, T-Fame, and Mama Monza. Thank you all for joining, and we'll be back next week with a new episode of Meadows and Makers. And Sahid Miller had a quick question. What topics do we usually discuss on the show? This show is all about being self-reliant in these modern times, and I try to bring on homesteaders and maker-type guests that are dealing with technologies that are out there that can make their lives easier and more abundant. And so that's the kind of show that this podcast is all about. And like I said, coming up is Crimson Clad and Steam Wave Saturday, so y'all hang tight for that. And appreciate everybody for hanging out. And we'll catch you guys next week on another show of the Meadows and Makers podcast. So we'll catch you guys next time. And let me pull up my outro music, and we'll play you guys out by Awake by Devon and Junk Feathers. Robbie, really appreciate your time today and sharing this information.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. And
all right.
Stay tuned for our Kickstarter campaign that we put out there, and we'll hope to get a live workshop going in the near future and be able to get some get some people out that are interested in this kind of thing to my property to do some hands-on instructions. So thank you all again, and this is Awake by Devon and Junk Feathers to play us out. So we'll see you guys next time. Peace.